My name is Mabel Harding. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. For 6 years, my husband said the same sentence to me about a green folder in his workshop. Don't touch it until I'm gone, Mabel. He died on a Wednesday in October. We'd been married 44 years. 3 weeks later, 9 of us sat in a lawyer's office on Cumberland Street for the reading of the will, and my son looked across the table with a small smile and said, "Well, looks like Mum gets the paperwork pile. She inherits the IOUs." His wife nodded. His aunt looked out the window. My daughter looked at the table. That night, I drove to the workshop. Welcome to Fierce Mom Stories. This is where women over 60 tell the stories their families expected them to keep quiet. Subscribe before we go any further, and drop a comment. I read everyone. I should tell you what I did for a living, because it matters later. I spent 31 years as a records secretary for the Lunenburg County School Board. I started in 1987, filing attendance records and budget amendments in a basement office that smelled like floor wax and old paper. My supervisor used to say I could find any document in that building blindfolded. Every report card, every policy amendment, every grievance filed and resolved, dated, cross-referenced, initialed. Nothing left my hands without a second set of eyes on it. At home, I never read a thing my husband put in front of me. Not the mortgage, not the insurance, not the business filings. I signed where he pointed and put the pen down. It wasn't that he pushed me away from it. I handed myself out, one less thing on a Tuesday, when I was already tired. My husband ran Harding Marine and Hardware on Lincoln Street, 2 blocks from the harbor. He opened it in 1979 with $8,000 of his own savings and a line of credit from the Royal Bank. By the time he retired in 2015, it was the kind of place the whole county relied on. Caulking, compound, bilge pumps, propane fittings, whatever a working waterfront needed. He was 72 when the doctors found the tumor. He took the news the way he took a January storm, unpleasant, requiring attention, dealt with by moving steadily. He died on October 9th at 6:45 in the morning. I was right there. He went quietly, and the kitchen looked exactly the same as it had 5 minutes before. The funeral was the following Saturday at St. John's Anglican on Pelham Street. My son drove down from Dartmouth in his truck. He's 45, broad in the shoulders the way his father was, but without his father's stillness. He's been running the store since 2015. He wore his good jacket and stood at the door for 2 solid hours, and I was proud of him for most of that afternoon. My daughter-in-law came separately. She handles the store's bookkeeping. She brought her laptop in a tote bag and stepped outside twice to take calls. My daughter, my youngest, drove up from Halifax. She is 40 and works for a provincial housing agency, which means she is the only person in our family who is not frightened of a hard sentence. She sat beside me through the whole service and held my hand during the second hymn. My husband's older sister, Dottie, is 74. She sat in the front pew and told 4 separate people that my husband had built that store entirely from nothing, with no help from anyone. Which isn't quite true, but isn't worth correcting at a funeral. 14 days after we buried him, my son was appointed personal representative of the estate by the Nova Scotia Probate Court. He filed the application himself. "Mum, you've never dealt with probate. Let me handle the paperwork side." That seemed reasonable. I thanked him. I only learned this part later. 19 days after his appointment, he wrote himself a check from the estate account for $7,500, estate administration fee in the memo line. That was 1 month after I had paid the funeral home on King Street, $11,400, out of my own savings account, because when they called to say the bill was past due, I paid it quietly and said nothing. He just lost his father. The will reading was on a Thursday in November at the office of Hargrove and Associates on Cumberland Street. The solicitor, a man named Alistair, who had drawn the will in 2016, read it the way people read legal documents, steadily and without color. Article 2 gave me my husband's personal effects and the household contents. Article 3 he read straight through. I give to my wife Mabel all promissory notes and other obligations owing to me at the date of my death, together with all security held therefor. Article 4 gave the house on Montague Street to our son. Article 5 split the residue 60-40 between our son and our daughter. My son didn't laugh out loud. He smiled. A small, settled smile, the one he uses when something confirms what he already knew. "So Mom gets the paperwork pile," he said. "She inherits the IOUs." His wife touched his arm. Dottie made a sound by the window. My daughter looked at the table. And here is what I noticed and stored and did not understand for 7 more days. Alistair stopped reading for half a breath. He looked at me over his glasses. Then he went back to the page. I caught it because 31 years of watching, for the moment something doesn't add up, had made the habit automatic. I didn't understand what I'd seen. Not yet. I drove home along the 332. The bay was flat and gray. I did arithmetic in the car. The house on Montague Street, where I had slept every night since 1981, was assessed at $340,000. My CPP survivor's benefit would be roughly $750 a month. My own Canada pension came to $890. I had $31,000 in an RRSP account, minus the $11,000 in savings dollars I just spent on a funeral. At 4:20 that afternoon, my daughter-in-law sent me a text, a link to a retirement residence in Dartmouth. Her message said, "Just thought you'd want to have options. Beautiful sunroom, 3 exclamation points." Nobody said get out. Nobody has ever said that to me directly. What they did was begin planning my next address while I was still sitting in my coat in my own kitchen. You add it up, and the sum is the same. She'll agree. She always does. I went and checked the pantry. 2 cans of baked beans passed their best before date. I set them on the counter and stood there and asked a question I didn't want to ask. How long does a promise hold when the person you made it to is no longer here to collect it? I put on my coat. I walked out the back to the workshop. The workshop is a cedar-sided building my husband put up himself in 1994. It still smells like him. Linseed oil, sawdust, the faint mineral trace of the propane heater he ran in winter. Every tool hung on pegboard with its outline drawn in black marker, so you can see at a glance what's missing. The green folder was on the bottom shelf of the metal rack under the workbench, between a tin of rust-proofing compound and a box of router bits. A standard accordion folder, green, the elastic band gone brittle from the cold. On the tab, in his block printing, Mabel. Just that. My name on a shelf I had never touched in 20 years. I stood there with it in my hands and counted. He had said the sentence 4 times. The first was in 2018, when he'd come home from town in a quiet mood and hardly spoken at dinner. The second was the spring my mother passed. The third was the day the doctor called. The fourth was September, sitting in the garden in his fleece vest weeks before the end. And that last time he'd added something he had never said before. "Don't tell our son first. Mabel, don't call him." I sat on the workshop stool and opened the folder. The first document was a promissory note, dated March 15, 2015, $480,000, interest at 4.5%, monthly payments of $2,664.18. First payment due April 1, 2015. I read the numbers 3 times. Then I let myself look at the signature line. My son's name. That handwriting, the looping capital H in Harding, that I had watched him practice at our kitchen table when he was 12 on the back of a spelling test, over and over until it looked like something a man would sign on a business document. Stapled behind the last page was a smaller sheet, barely the size of an envelope, 4 typed lines, 2 signatures, paid to the order of Mabel E. Harding, signed by my husband, dated September 12, 2019. I didn't know the legal name for it then. I know it now. It's called an allonge, the document you attach when there's no room left on the note to write in a new payee. But sitting in that workshop at 10 o'clock at night with the propane heater ticking, I only knew one thing. My name was on that document. Not as a second signature. Not in smaller print. First name, middle initial, last name, centered on the line, the way you'd write it on something that actually mattered. My hands were shaking. I put the page flat on the workbench to keep reading. Then I did what I have always done with a pile of unfamiliar documents. I inventoried it. Same habit as every September when the new student files came in. You don't guess at what you have. You lay it out and write it down. There were 6 items in that folder. 1. The promissory note with the allonge attached. 2. A commercial mortgage, 18 pages, stamped in blue ink on the front, slightly off-center, Lunenburg County Registry of Deeds, Book 3847, page 211. Registered March 15, 2015, at 10:22 in the morning. 3. An assignment of leases and rents, 6 pages, same blue stamp. Book 3847, page 229, same day, 29 minutes later. 4. A 1-page document titled Assignment of Mortgage. My husband's name at the top, my name below, a second stamp. Book 4103, page 88. Registered September 12, 2019 at 9:14 in the morning. 5. A coil-bound notepad with 3 ruled columns, date, amount, balance, filled in pencil. 6. A sealed envelope with my name on it in block capitals. I sat with item 4 for a long time. September 12, 2019. That was the day he had driven into Bridgewater in the morning and come home at noon saying he'd been running errands. He'd seemed quietly satisfied in the way he always was after. He'd handled something he'd been thinking about for a while. That same fall was when he first said the sentence about the folder. I picked up the sealed envelope, then I put it back down. I wasn't ready. I opened the coil notepad. He had kept a payment ledger in pencil, 3 columns, date, amount, balance. First entry, April 1, 2015, 2,664 18s. Then May, then June. Page after page in that small, even printing he'd learned in the Navy. You could watch him age in those columns. The early entries are dark and deliberate. Around 2020, the lines start pressing a little harder into the paper, the way hands do when the grip isn't quite what it was. Through 2021, not a single month missed. Then August 2022, no PMT. Beside it, in parentheses, says new bank account transfer delayed. December 2022, no PEMT. January 2023, no PEMT. I turned the page. The no PMT entries continued without a break. 15 months, 16. He'd started numbering them. No PMT 12, no PMT 13. Like he was keeping count for someone who would need to count without asking. The last entry was dated September 28th of this year, 11 days before he died. His handwriting by then was difficult. The letters leaned. The pencil skipped. It said, no PEMT 25. He numbered it, 25 months in a row. I sat in that workshop and understood something about the last 2 years of my husband's life that no one had told me. He knew. Every single month he knew. He got up. He came to this workbench. He opened this pad, and he wrote down that his son had skipped him again. Then he came inside and asked me how my day had gone. Then I opened the envelope, 1 sheet of paper, both sides, ballpoint pen, dated September 12, 2019. He wrote, Mabel, I'm not putting this in your hands while I'm still breathing, because you will call him the same evening, and by Friday you'll have forgiven the whole business. You forgave my sister in 1997, and that cost us the truck money. You are not weak. You are fast in one direction only, and I cannot let that happen here. I got to that paragraph and put the letter face down on the workbench and looked out at the dark yard. He wrote, I am not asking you to be someone different. I am asking you to be late. Give it time. Read everything in here before you do a single other thing. I stood up and went inside and put the kettle on. Standing there, waiting for the water, I heard my son again in that lawyer's office 3 hours earlier. She inherits the IOUs. She inherits it as nothing but debt. I said it out loud to my own kitchen in the dark. He was right. There was nothing in that folder but debt. He just had the arrow pointing the wrong direction. I didn't read the second page of the letter that night. I set it back in the envelope and went to bed and did not sleep much. 12 days after the will reading, my son came by for my husband's cordless drill set and a folding workbench from the garage. He backed the truck in without phoning first and talked while he worked. He talked about the house. No rush, he said, but they should get a realtor to walk through in the spring. He said it the way you'd schedule a furnace inspection. Settled. Already decided. I asked him one question. When was your last payment to your father? He stopped with his hand on the drill case. What payment? I didn't answer. I waited. 31 years of sitting across from people who wanted to fill silence had made this second nature. He straightened up and smiled. A smaller version of the one from the lawyer's office. Mom, come on. You can't owe money to yourself. Dad and I had an understanding. He loaded the case and asked if I wanted him to take the spare extension cord as well. I said yes, take the cord. Let me tell you why my son believed that. Because he did believe it. In 2015, he was 40, and he had worked in that store since he was 16. He assumed it would come to him. My husband said no. You'll buy it the way a stranger would, and it'll mean more. His reason was a cousin who had been given a boat repair business from nothing in the 90s and lost it in 4 years, and spent the rest of his life explaining why. So our son signed the note at a table in a lawyer's office and then went and told people his own father made him pay for his inheritance. For 9 years he had told himself that loan was a formality between family. He was wrong about one date. Just one. I called my daughter the next morning. She got quiet when I told her I'd opened the folder. Read me the titles, she said. Just the headings. So I read them. Promissory mortgage, assignment of leases and rents. Then I read the fourth, assignment of mortgage, Howard Edmund Harding to Mabel E. Harding. She didn't speak for a few seconds. Then, Mom, Dad signed the loan over to you. I said I didn't understand what that meant. She said, it means the person your brother owes money to is not the estate. It's you. It has been you since 2019. I sat down on the arm of the couch. Then she said the thing that mattered most, and said it twice. You need certified copies from the registry. Anyone can print a document at home. The registry entry is the part nobody can argue with. I wrote that on the back of a Tim Hortons receipt that was on the counter. She asked if she should drive up. I said not yet. I said it in the voice I used on staff who wanted to recount a tally because they didn't like the first answer. I had somewhere to be, and I wanted to go alone. On Monday morning, I put on my burgundy cardigan and drove 22 minutes to Bridgewater. The Lunenburg County Registry of Deeds is on Dufferin Street, open 9 to 4, Monday to Friday. There is a small parking lot in the back. I had driven past that building for 30 years without once going in. Inside, a long counter, shelves of bound ledgers along the back wall, 3 public computer terminals near the window. A woman at the counter, late 40s, reading glasses pushed up into her hair, looked up when the door opened. I told her I didn't know what I was looking for. She said, most people don't. What's the surname? Harding. She walked me to the nearest terminal. Grantor index, that's whoever is giving or transferring. Grantee is the one receiving. Pick your date range, type the name, hit search. That's the whole secret. I typed Harding and hit enter. 44 years of my husband came up on a screen in a room I had never been in. Book 3847, page 211, Commercial Mortgage, March 15, 2015. Grantor, my son. Grantee, Howard E. Harding. Book 3847, page 229, Assignment of Leases and Rents, same date. Book 4103, page 88, Assignment of Mortgage, September 12, 2019. Grantor, Howard E. Harding. Grantee, Mabel E. Harding. There I was, in a public record on Dufferin Street since 2019. My son's own name was in that same index, 4 entries above mine. Anyone in my family could have walked into that building on any business day for the past 6 years and found all of it in under 10 minutes. Nobody had. The woman at the counter, Joelle, made me certified copies of the 2 documents that mattered. 43 pages at $1.25 each, plus 2 certification fees. I paid $57.75 in cash. She gave me a receipt. I laid the registry printouts on the counter beside the originals from Howard's folder, side by side, and went through them line by line with my finger. Every word matched. Every number matched. Even the off-center blue stamp matched. I thanked Joelle and went to my car. I stopped at the Tim Hortons on King Street and bought a small box of Timbits, which I had not done since before my husband got sick. I sat in the parking lot with the engine off and ate 4 of them and called a lawyer. That evening, I read the commercial mortgage at my kitchen table with the overhead light on and a ruler under each line. 31 years of reading policy documents makes you read for the verbs, not the feeling. Section 11. 15 days past due was a default. The lender shall deliver written notice. The borrower shall have 30 days to cure. Shall, not may, shall. Section 14. If uncured, the full outstanding balance becomes due at the lender's option. The assignment of leases and rents was the one I understood slowest and liked most. Paragraph 3. While the borrower is not in default, the borrower may collect all rents from the property. Upon default, the lender may notify the tenants directly and collect the rents herself. 84 Lincoln Street is a 3-story brick building. Ground floor is the store. Second floor, a chartered accountant's practice, $1,050 a month since 2013. Third floor, a physiotherapy clinic and a solo bookkeeper, $1,650 combined. $3,100 a month that had nothing to do with the store's cash register. And then I understood Article 3 of the will, and I laughed for the first time in 6 weeks. All promissory notes and other obligations owing to me at the date of my death. My husband had put that clause in as a backup. He'd already moved the note out of his estate in September 2019. It was never in the estate for anyone to inherit. He just wanted belt and suspenders, as he always said about anything important. The lawyer I found was on Victoria Road. Her name was Colette. She had done estate and title work in Lunenburg County for 26 years. Retainer of $2,000, rate of $325 an hour, and she told me both before I sat down. I put Howard's folder on her desk and said nothing else. She read for 20 minutes. She made no sound, except once at the coil notepad, when she pushed her glasses up onto her forehead. Then she said, "Mrs. Harding, do you understand what your son's position requires?" I said I wasn't sure. "It requires this note to have still been inside your husband's estate on the day he died. If he'd inherited both the note and the debt collapses. Lawyers call it merger. It's how your son has been living. But the note left your husband's estate on September 12, 2019. She had tapped the assignment. There's nothing to merge. He doesn't owe the estate. He owes you." She asked whether I knew why my husband had made me wait. I said there was a letter, and I'd only read half of it. She let that sit for a moment and moved on. She gave me the timeline. Notice of default by registered mail. 30-day cure period. Then, if nothing came, acceleration of the full balance and the assignment of leases and rents activated. I could notify the tenants directly and collect the rents. "Anything happening in a courtroom before spring is unlikely," she said. "Anyone who tells you faster is selling something." At the door, she asked one more question. "Do you want your son to lose that building?" I stood in the doorway for a moment. I said, "I don't know yet." She turned a notepad around so I could see it. 2 columns. Left, outside the estate, the note, the mortgage, the commercial rents, my property, nothing to do with probate. Right, inside the estate, the house on Montague Street, the truck, the bank accounts, within the court's reach. She walked me through the Testator's Family Maintenance Act. In Nova Scotia, a surviving spouse can make a claim against the estate if the will hasn't made adequate provision. The court considers the whole picture. She also told me the part a less careful lawyer might have skimmed past. My note counts as an asset in that analysis. A $480,000 note in my name gets weighed against my claim first. In dollar terms, the maintenance application might net very little. "Then why file it?" I asked. "Because filing freezes distribution. He cannot transfer that house to himself while a maintenance petition is pending. And I would rather hold a right and not need it than need one and not have it." I said I'd already waited 6 years without knowing it. On a Tuesday in January, I drove to the post office on King Street and sent the notice of default by registered mail, 2 pages. Colette had drafted it. I read it 4 times before I signed off. 25 missed debt payments, $66,604.50 in arrears, late fees of $1,665.10, outstanding principal of $381,201.33, total to cure $69,269.60. Deadline 30 days from receipt. The signed receipt card came back Thursday. The signature on it was my daughter-in-law's. 6 days of quiet. On the 7th night, at 11:15, my phone lit up on the nightstand. I played the voicemail in the morning with my coffee and wrote down the 2 sentences that mattered. "You have no idea what you've started. Dad would never have done this." He said it twice. The second time, his voice broke a little. That was the hardest part. My daughter-in-law texted an hour later. Calmer, more deliberate. "We've retained a solicitor. Please understand that what you're doing constitutes elder financial abuse, and we will treat it accordingly." I read that one twice. I am 67 years old, and I had become the predator in my own house. Here is what neither of them did in the 2 weeks they had a solicitor working on their behalf. Neither one asked what date those documents went into the registry. Dottie called on a Saturday evening. I should tell you about Dottie because she is not simply a loud woman at a funeral. There is a reason, and it goes back to 1979. When my husband wanted to open the store, he needed $5,000 alongside the bank loan. Dottie was 31 and working at the credit union in Liverpool, and she gave him her savings. No interest, no written agreement. He paid her back by 1984, and she still has the canceled check. I have seen it come out at 3 family gatherings. To her, that money never stopped being a stake. When my husband sold the store to our son in 2015 without consulting her, she decided, though she has never said this to my face, that I was behind it. At the community center potluck that winter, she said in front of 4 people at the coffee table, "Howard built that store with his own 2 hands. He was the one who understood business." I didn't raise my voice. "I have never raised my voice at Dottie," I said. "You're right about the first part." Then I went and got my tea. A woman behind me touched my sleeve. It was the office manager from the accountant's practice on the 2nd floor of 84 Lincoln Street, Maricel, who has worked there for 11 years. She said quietly, "Mabel, I've got something you need to see. Not here." She came to my house Tuesday morning with an envelope already opened. The letter inside was on letterhead I had never seen. It directed all tenants at 84 Lincoln Street to redirect rent payments immediately to a numbered company, 147833 Nova Scotia Limited, and provided a new account number and routing code. It was signed by my daughter-in-law as property manager. Maricel said, "I've paid rent to your husband and then your son for 11 years. Nobody has ever handed me a numbered company in a letter." That afternoon, I used the public terminals at the library on Jubilee Road. 9 minutes. 1124783 Nova Scotia Limited. Incorporated with the Nova Scotia Registry of Joint Stock Companies on October 20th, 11 days after my husband died, 15 days before the will was read. She had registered a company to receive those rents before a single member of our family had heard one word of his will. I want to be fair about my daughter-in-law because she is not a cartoon. In 2011, the bank foreclosed on her parents' home in Dartmouth during the recession. She was 29. She watched her parents pack into a rented minivan, and she has told me the story at my table. Since that day, she has never trusted a dollar without her own name on it. Every account is titled, every entity registered. She moves fast and she writes things down. I understand where that comes from. I have never once confused it for an excuse. That night, I turned Howard's notepad to a blank page and drew a line down the middle with his pencil stub. The one still clipped inside the folder's front pocket, worn down to less than 3 inches. Left side, outside the estate. The note, the mortgage, the rents. Right side, inside the estate. The house, the truck, the accounts. Then Colette forwarded me the preliminary inventory our son had filed as personal representative with the probate court. 2 things were wrong. The $7,500 fee he'd paid himself 19 days after appointment was listed without court approval. And the rental income from the small garage behind the store, $300 a month, appeared nowhere at all. 3 months of it gone somewhere that wasn't the estate. Colette walked me through Section 67 of the Nova Scotia Probate Act on the phone, like someone reading a recipe. Estate administration expenses are subject to court review. You cannot pay yourself ahead of approved creditors. You cannot distribute assets while outstanding claims remain unsatisfied. And the person who paid for the funeral and has not been reimbursed sits ahead of a personal representative's fee in the queue. There was a pause on the phone. Then Colette said, "Mrs. Harding, say that last part again," slowly. In late January, Colette sent letters to both tenants on the upper floors of 84 Lincoln Street. Each letter had the certified copy of the assignment of leases and rents attached, and the certified copy of the assignment of mortgage. Plain language. Upon default, the lender, me, had the right to collect the rents directly. The accountant's office check arrived on the 1st of February, $1,450, made out to Mabel Harding. The physiotherapy clinic followed 2 days later. My son was in my driveway by 4 o'clock that same afternoon. My neighbor across the road stopped shoveling and leaned on the handle and watched. My son used the word vindictive. He used it 3 times. He said a lawyer was turning me into someone I wasn't. He said his father would be ashamed. I stood on the step with my hands in my cardigan pockets. I said one thing, read the registry entry, and look at the date on it. Then I went inside and stood in the hall until I heard his truck back out onto the street. That night I finally understood the last thing Howard had said to me in September. Don't tell our son first. If I'd known in 2019, I would have called him that same evening. He'd have sent one payment to quiet me, and under the terms of that note, one payment accepted resets the default clock. 30 days, all over again, every time. Howard didn't keep me in the dark because he didn't trust me. He kept me waiting because he knew exactly what I would do. The cure deadline passed at the end of February. Nothing arrived. No transfer, no partial payment, no letter from their solicitor offering anything. I made a pot of soup and fell asleep in the armchair before 9 o'clock. In early March, Colette filed 6 documents with the Nova Scotia Probate Court. A claim under the Testator's Family Maintenance Act. An application for a family allowance during administration. An objection to the inventory. A motion to remove the personal representative for self-dealing, the $7,500 fee, and 3 months of missing garage rent. A statement of claim for funeral expenses, $11,400, paid January 15th, reimbursed by no one. An application for a full accounting within 45 days. The clerk stamped everyone and gave me my copies. The earliest available date on the probate court calendar was Tuesday, April 22nd, 43 days. I did ordinary things in those 43 days. I cleaned the eave strews with a man named Danny from down the road. I kept my physio appointment. I washed the burgundy cardigan twice. Once because it needed it, and once because I'd decided what I was going to wear and wanted it ready. Every time I hung it back in the closet, I felt steadier. I had known what I was going to wear since the day I walked out of the registry on Dufferin Street. Then came 2 weeks of noise. Dottie made calls. I know of 8 relatives she contacted because 5 of them called me afterward to say they weren't getting involved. My daughter-in-law posted a photograph on social media. My husband in the backyard the summer before his diagnosis, laughing at something out of frame. The caption said, "Missing the man who always put family first. 71 shares." I counted them once and then stopped looking. 3 weeks before the court date, my son's solicitor sent Colette an offer. $30,000 cash in full and final settlement of every claim, the note, the petitions, all of it released. 72 hours to respond. Colette called and read it to me. Then she said, "You don't have to answer today." I said, "The number is on the note, not in their letter." She laughed. It was the only time I ever heard her do it. My daughter drove up from Halifax the night before and slept in her old room with the low ceiling. We ate scrambled eggs at 10 o'clock the way we used to when she was in high school. She asked if I was nervous. I told her the thing I'd been turning over since November. Your brother said, I inherit nothing but debt. He was right. There was never anything in that folder but debt. He just didn't know which direction the arrow was pointing. At 9 o'clock the next morning, I walked into the Lunenburg County Courthouse on King Street in Bridgewater with the green accordion folder under my arm. Courtroom 2 has high ceilings and tall windows, and a bench that looks like it has not been comfortable since 1968. There were 4 other matters on the docket: a guardianship hearing, 2 estate filings, a property dispute between 2 brothers from the Hebville Road who would not look at each other. I counted the room while we waited. 24 people. My son sat at the respondent's table in his good jacket. He'd had a haircut. His wife sat in the second row with her phone face down on her knee. Dottie sat directly behind my son, close enough to touch his shoulder. She did it twice. My daughter sat beside me. I wore the burgundy cardigan and gray slacks and my mother's watch. I had been awake since 4:30. At 5 I had gone back to the folder and checked the certified copies. The way you check a lock you already know is set. On the table in front of Colette was the green folder with an exhibit sticker pressed on the front, slightly off-center, half covering Howard's block printing of my name. I kept looking at that sticker. Someone in an office had put a number on my husband's handwriting. The registrar called the matter. My son's solicitor was polite. He was thorough. He said the debt had been verbally forgiven. Repeatedly, over many years, he said I had never participated in the business, never been a signing officer on the accounts, never sat at a closing. He said the removal petition was a family disagreement brought into the wrong room. And then he said, and I'll give you his exact words, Mrs. Harding is being guided. That is a courteous way to say that a woman my age cannot have arrived at a decision on her own. I have heard that sentiment in other forms for decades. I was not prepared for it in a courtroom. The judge let him finish. Then she asked one question. Is the forgiveness in writing anywhere? Counsel said, oral, Your Honor, consistent over many years. The judge looked past him at my son and asked directly whether he had made payments on the note in the past 2 years. My son stood. He smiled. Not the full one, a smaller version of it. Your Honor, he said, my mother inherited nothing but debt. That is literally all that was ever in that folder. He half turned when he said it, the way you do when you want the room. My daughter put her hand flat on my knee. Colette stood. She had 4 sheets of paper and nothing else. She spoke at the pace you use when you need every word to land. Exhibit 1. Promissory note dated March 15, 2015. Principal, $480,000. Signed by the respondent. Attached is an allonge endorsed pay to the order of Mabel E. Harding, signed by the deceased, dated September 12, 2019. Exhibit 2. Commercial mortgage on 84 Lincoln Street, Lunenburg, registered in the Lunenburg County Registry of Deeds at Book 3847, page 211, March 15, 2015. Exhibit 3. Assignment of mortgage from Howard Edmund Harding to Mabel E. Harding. Registered at Book 41-3, page 88, September 12, 2019. She held up the green folder when she said the exhibit number. Then she set it down and said the sentence I have turned over every week since. This note left the deceased's estate 6 years and 1 month before he died. There is nothing in the estate for anyone to inherit. The doctrine of merger does not apply. The respondent does not owe money to himself. He owes it to his mother. The judge looked at the respondent solicitor over her glasses. Did anyone search the grantor index before today? Counsel looked down at his papers for 2 full seconds. We relied on information from our client, Your Honor. Then, Exhibit 4. A letter to the tenants of 84 Lincoln Street, signed by the respondent's wife, redirecting rents to 112-47833 Nova Scotia Limited. A company incorporated 11 days after the deceased's death, 15 days before the will was read. She let that number sit. Exhibit 5. The payment ledger, kept in pencil, 25 consecutive entries reading no payment, beginning August 2022. The final entry dated September 28th of this year, 11 days before the deceased died. She read the last 3 lines aloud in a flat voice. No payment, no payment, no payment, 25. My son came out of his chair. That is my father's handwriting. He was loud enough to fill the room. That is a sick man's notebook. A dying man with a pencil. That is not evidence. His solicitor had a hand on his forearm. The judge said 2 words. Sit down. He sat. I did not turn around. I'll tell you why, plainly. I was afraid that if I looked at his face, I would get up and cross the room to him. He is my son. He was 30 feet away, being told to sit down by a stranger, and everything in me wanted to go to him. So I kept my eyes on the green folder on the table, and I kept looking at Howard's name on the tab. The judge asked whether I wished to be heard. I stood. Colette had told me I could speak from where I was. I said 5 things. Your Honor, I am not asking this court to take my son's building. I am asking that he pay what he signed. I paid for my husband's funeral on January 15th, $11,400. I have not been reimbursed. Then the one nobody in that room expected. Your Honor, I am withdrawing the claim under the Testator's Family Maintenance Act. The judge asked if I understood what I was releasing. I said I did. The note is already mine. With the note counted as my asset in the estate analysis, the maintenance claim would likely produce very little, and whatever it might generate would come at a cost to my daughter's share. I did not want more than I was owed. I wanted exactly what I was owed. And I am keeping the family allowance because I am still sleeping in that house and I still need to eat. The judge granted the family allowance and ordered immediate reimbursement of the funeral expenses in Class 2. Ahead of the personal representative's fee, she held the $7,500 administration payment pending full review. She removed my son as personal representative and appointed a neutral estate administrator from Mahone Bay, who, Colette had told me, answers her phone. She ordered a complete accounting within 45 days. The note itself she did not touch. Probate court doesn't reach that far. That one was between me and my son. We came out into the corridor at 10:15, stone floor. Every shoe in that building was loud. My daughter-in-law went first through the glass door. It banged hard enough that the sheriff's officer looked up from his desk. Dottie stopped in front of me. She opened her handbag. She closed it. Then she said, quietly, so only I could hear it, he never told me either. She is 74 years old, and for about 4 seconds, she looked exactly like a woman standing in the October wind beside a grave. Then she straightened her coat and said, "You had no business bringing this family into a courtroom," and walked out to the parking lot. My son came last. He wasn't loud anymore. He looked the way he looked at 11 years old outside the principal's office, not quite sure what the next few minutes would hold. He said, "Why didn't you just tell me, Mum? Why didn't you call me? 7 years and you never said a word." So I told him, it's the only long answer I gave all day. "Because your father knew that if I'd found out, I'd have phoned you the same evening. You'd have sent 1 payment to settle me down, and under the terms of that note, 1 payment accepted resets the default clock from the beginning. 30 days all over again. He didn't hide this from me. He kept me from undoing it." My son stood very still in that corridor. Then he asked the question I have thought about most since that morning. Did he not trust me? All those years, did he think that little of me? I said, "Go home and read the 2nd page." Then I walked out to my car and sat with the engine off for 20 minutes, and then I drove home to Lunenburg. Here is what happened after, in order, because feelings are cheap and dates are not. The neutral administrator filed a full accounting in late April. The $7,500 went back into the estate. The 3 months of garage rent went back in, behind it. The funeral reimbursement came through on May 9th, 114 days after I'd paid it out of my own savings account on a January afternoon. In June, my son cured the default. He arranged financing through his business bank and transferred $69,269.60, the arrears, the late fees, and the costs. I did not foreclose. I had thought about it for 20 minutes in that parking lot and decided against it. I reinstated the note in writing. Automatic bank transfer on the 1st of every month. No exceptions. One payment more than 15 days late, and the full balance accelerates with no conversation about it. He signed in Colette's office. He asked for a copy for his records. I said, "Of course. That is exactly how this works." The tenants went back to paying him in July once the note was current. The house on Montague Street sold in September. After the allowances and the estate costs came off the top, Article 4 gave my son considerably less than he had been telling people it would. I bought a 2-bedroom on Dufferin Street in Bridgewater, good south-facing windows, a kitchen with a gas stove. The deed says Mabel E. Harding. Just that. 112-47833 Nova Scotia Limited was dissolved in August. Dottie stopped calling. In November, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I read the bottom half of Howard's letter. He had written 3 reasons for making me wait. The first I've already told you. You'd have called him the same night. The second I'll read as he wrote it. I have watched him at that counter for 20 years, and I know what he'd do the minute I was in the ground. I could not live with knowing that and still being alive to see it. So I built the test, and I left the room. The third is near the bottom of the second page, underlined twice. And Mabel, one payment resets everything. Don't call him. Let it get quiet. You have never had your name on a single piece of property in this province. Now you do. I'm sorry it took me until I was dying to fix that. I sat with that a long while. Then I found a pen, and on the tab of that green accordion folder, underneath Howard's block printing of my name, I wrote 2 words in my own handwriting. Open it. The folder sits on the bookshelf in the front room in Bridgewater, at eye level, where anyone who comes through the door can see it. Howard's pencil stub is still clipped inside the front pocket. I have not sharpened it, and I'm not going to. Sunday mornings, my son is still welcome at my table. On the 1st of each month, the transfer arrives on time. In my kitchen, I'm his mother. On that note, I'm the lender. Those 2 things are not as hard to hold at once as you might think. Last month, I took my daughter to the registry on Dufferin Street and showed her the grantor index. Pick your date range, type the name, hit search. It took 9 minutes to find 44 years of her father in a room with a humming radiator and a chair that sticks at a tilt. She cried a little. I let her. And then I told her the only piece of advice I have from all of this. I did not win because I was smarter than anyone else in that courtroom. I won because I was the only one willing to spend one afternoon reading something that had been sitting in a public building on Dufferin Street since September of 2019. Read the paper with your name on it before someone else reads it for you. That is the whole story. 1 green folder, $57.75, and a son who never once checked.